Hey, Charles.
Hey. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Mom.
I can hear you.
Everybody feeling good?
Yes.
No, I'm bored.
You're not gonna do this?
I'm also, well, I'm definitely not bored at this time. There's a lot going on, but I look forward
Can
again.
you see me, Chelsea? Can you see me?
No.
Okay.
You can't see.
Hold up, hold up.
Oh, you can't.
No. This you can.
No, you have to.
Unmute.
I unmuted you. I
You
muted
can
you
only
for
have one speaking
You mute yours.
when you're in the same room.
Okay.
Strange. So no picture.
Hi, Wayne. How are you?
Unmute. Video should be on.
Oh, there's two places you have to mute.
Yeah, mute in the app. Mute in the app.
And then near sound at the top.
You guys, do you mind if I mute you while this is going on? Because this
Yeah,
is
do that. Do that.
Bonsoir. Hey, JJ.
Is that John or John and Jen?
yeah.
The whole gang.
Yes. You guys are very early. I love that. That's wonderful. We'll give everybody a couple minutes to get in.
We're anxious.
I know. We all are. We all are. Awesome. How was everybody's day? Everybody enjoyed the snow?
We did.
Good.
That's a great picture, JJ.
Chelsea, can you see Molly and me?
Yes, I can.
You can. Okay, cool. That's all I want to know. Now,
Perfect.
It burns.
I didn't realize we were not part of the scene here.
Yeah,
We are now, right?
Thank you, John.
Oh, we're eating, sorry.
good for you. Everybody should enjoy the tasting the way that they like to. So we'll give everybody a little bit more time. Maybe we'll just get started around 5:05 or so. We'll see. We'll see once everybody gets in.
How's the snow in Boston?
It's crazy. There's so much snow here. It's just nuts.
Oh, wow.
I stayed here today just so that I could not go in and drive in this weather. So, but it is, I'm surprised I didn't realize we'd get so much snow. I guess I wasn't keeping track of the weather report the way that everybody else was. So this was a fun little winter surprise for sure. Very crazy. Let's see. Awesome. Cool. What's everybody drinking?
You want us, we're drinking champagne.
Oh, good for you. That's awesome. Oh, nice. You're drinking the Occhipinti to represent Sicily. I love that.
We're having pasta tonight too.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Oh, I'm so excited. That makes me so happy. A little Sicilian representation in Gloucester. That's
Can we sip while we're waiting?
Yeah, of course. Please, please drink. Please enjoy. Everybody should just enjoy the way that they like. There are no stringent rules here about how and when to drink. So please enjoy. Hi, Marion.
How are you?
Thank you. Great to hear your voice.
Nice to see you.
Awesome. We'll let everybody get in and we'll start in a couple minutes, okay?
Sure, no problem.
Awesome. Hi, Dennis. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Great, thank you. Thanks for joining. We'll get started in a couple minutes, okay?
Chelsea, good.
Yeah, I'm glad. Something for everybody.
It's got a light lift to it.
Yeah, it's a really unique wine. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but I'm definitely always intrigued by a lot of these great Sicilian wines, and this is kind of one of the top producers, and we have a lot of female winemaker representation tonight. So a lot of leading ladies of Italy that we'll talk about. It should be fun. Awesome. Hi, Ellen.
Hi.
Hi, Emily.
Or-
Hey, Al.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm so excited. We'll just get started in a couple of minutes, but everybody just feel free to get situated, your snacks, anything to eat. And once again, you can drink at your leisure, whether you're drinking the selections from tonight or just opening something else. So please enjoy however makes you happy. We'll just give everyone a couple minutes to get in and then we'll get started, okay?
So Chelsea, you also send this to people who can't plug in at this time, correct?
Yeah, I send recordings to everybody. So everybody can be part of it. Hi, Bill. Let Bill get in. Awesome. Hi, Diana. Hi, Faith.
Hi.
How's everybody doing?
Very well.
Great, awesome. We're going to give everybody a couple more minutes to get in and then we'll get started, okay?
Hello, George. You could come down and open some one bottle if you want for me. You could come down.
Awesome. We're just going to give it just a couple more minutes. Hi,
Judson.
Bells,
Ashley.
Judson.
how are you? Oh, let me turn those lights off in the back. It looks like I'm
Yeah,
run over by a truck.
that's a bright light. Awesome. Let's give it about one more minute and then we'll get started, if that works well. I'm so excited. This is going to be a fun, it's such a cozy night to be sharing wine with everybody. So I'm really looking forward to it. And it worked out perfectly. That's right after the snowstorm because we're all home and definitely it's a very fun night to have a little drink. So this should be great. And I'm just going to wait for a couple more people and people might just kind of continue to come in. So we'll give it one more minute. And then if people continue to come in at their leisure, then they're welcome to do that. But we'll get started in a second. Okay. Awesome. Alrighty. Well,
Hello, Judd Reese. How are you?
John, I'm not doing as well as you. You look like you're enjoying something delicious.
okay. Awesome. Let's get started, I think. We'll let some people filter in as they may, but just for the sake of everybody who came in at 6, we'll get the party started. And I'm super excited to have you all here. Once again, most people were here for last month's tasting, but for those of you who are new to CruBox, my name is Chelsea Bell. I started CruBox along with our wine director, Ian Halbert of Gordon's and our owner, David Gordon. And it's a fun monthly wine club that focuses on wines that have a specific sense of place to them. So Cru, once again, stands for a vineyard of designated quality. So we really want to focus on either like single vineyard sites or places around the world that create some of the world's greatest wines. And every single month, we're going to try to bring you some of our favorite selections, some things very much off the beaten path. And some selections might be grapes or regions that you might be more familiar with, but really the fun of CruBox is the exploration and just getting to try new things. And I think as we talk about our theme for tonight, exploring the possibilities of Italian wine, I think what's really exciting about some of these selections that we're choosing is to really think about the producer and like the importers too. So I'll kind of go over that as we walk through each wine together, but I think it's kind of really fun. Once you find a wine maybe from the selections tonight or from last month's box, for those of you who had the November box that you enjoy, I really recommend to start to explore that specific producer a little bit more, because that's definitely a really fun way to get much more kind of into wine, is to get to try all the different wines that one vineyard or winemaker makes, so that you can get to explore the world of wine a little bit more. And then also too, we'll go over some importers tonight as well that overall bring in some really great producers of really high quality. And it's something that just is sometimes interesting to keep in mind as you're exploring wine, because it's a great jumping off point. So with that being said, I was really excited to choose this theme for December because Italian wine is really something that makes me just really excited to be in the wine industry. And it's one of the things that got me just really into wine originally, because what I find about Italian wine to be so complex and exciting is the fact that you're always going to be learning something new. No matter what level you are in wine, if you're just starting out, if you've been involved for a very long time, even if you're at the top where you're a master of wine or a master sommelier, you betcha there's always going to be something new to learn with Italian wine. And the reason being is because within Italy, when you have a small map here on your handout, actually within Italy, there's 20 different wine regions. So that's, first of all, a lot of different regions to play around with. Every single region in Italy is wine producing. And within each region too, there are hundreds and hundreds upon hundreds of indigenous or native Italian grape varietals to work with. So you're always going to be exploring a new grape that's a little wild and crazy. And it just is a really fun journey or path to take. So every day you can learn something new when it comes to Italian wine. And it's just super, super fun to explore. And I love just getting in depth about all of the specific regions and what grapes are indigenous to each region. And it's so much fun. So I am just so enthusiastic about tonight's theme. And to get started on it, I think something that we all are really craving right now is the ability to travel. One day we'll get there. But Italy is just one of the most magical places in terms of just variety, from like north to south, whether you're in Piedmont in northwestern Italy, or you're in Puglia, kind of at the tip of the boot, or at one of the islands in Sardinia or Sicily. Each region is going to be so diverse and specific in terms of the grapes that are planted there, the cuisine, some of the like cultural practices. Everything's just a little bit different. So it's definitely super fun to explore. With that being said, I think we should get started and start talking about each wine. As I go through each one, I'll talk about it, I'll taste through it with you, and then I'll just open it up for any questions. I'll open it up for questions about each wine, but also if you want to ask questions about Italian wine, about wine in general, I want you to feel free to do that, because part of this fun virtual experience is about learning about each month's box, but also too, just like having some conversations about wine and each month's theme in general. So without further ado, would you like to start getting into these wines?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. Awesome. So before I go into the first one, I'll just let you know for this month, we did something a little bit different where we have a little icon key on the front of your insert here. And then you'll see on the back, when we go over each wine, there's a couple different like photos or little photos right underneath, which just are the icon keys, just giving you like a little extra information. So when I go over each wine, I'll kind of detail what that's all about. And if you have any questions about it, we can talk about it, okay? Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to take you to Piedmont first. We're going to northwestern Italy. In Piedmont or Piemonte, we have the 2018 Vietti, which is the producer, Dithrona, which is, we'll talk about what that means in a second, and it's a Colli Tortonese Timorasso. So a lot of the things that you might hear tonight, once again, might be a mouthful for Italian wine. We'll break down everything here. Vietti is going to be the producer, the winery. We have Colli Tortonese, which is the region, or it's actually what's called a DOC. So we have 4 different levels of classification for Italian wine. We have your VDT, which is your Vino da Tavola, your kind of entry-level table wine, can be kind of made anywhere. There's no rules. It's kind of wild and crazy, usually very gulpable, drinkable wines that usually are not consumed outside of their kind of very small area. Then you have your IGT or IGP wines, which can come from any of the 20 wine regions, and you still have some flexibility about grape varietals and yields and aging. And then at your tippity top, you have your DOC and DOCG wines, which are typically indicating very specific smaller senses of places, or which might be specific regions, might be even specific vineyard sites. So we're really indicating a smaller sense of place. And the DOC here is Colli Tortonese, which, as you can see on your map here, is going to be the A region. So it's in Piedmont, but it's actually a little bit closer here to the border of Liguria, which is going to be the region just to the south. And then you'll have Lombardy just to the east. This is kind of a classic area for this grape varietal, which is called Timorasso. If you have not heard of the grape Timorasso before, no worries. It is super rare, and it's a grape that's actually kind of been brought back from the brink of extinction. What's really interesting is the Vieti winery is owned by the Corrado family. They've been in operation for over 100 years. And something that they specialize in is the style of wine called Barolo, coming from Piedmont, which is an aged wine coming from the Nebbiolo grape varietal from the town of Barolo in about 11 different communes that surround the town of Barolo. While they're known for their red wines, they actually had originally brought back to life another white varietal called Arnez, which was a grape that was almost, had also died off, almost also had become extinct, but the Corrado family had helped to revive it back in the 90s with some other local growers, and they brought this grape varietal back to life. Arnez was a grape that comes from the Roero region, which is a little bit to the north of Barolo in Piedmont, but the Corrado family wanted to go further from reviving the Arnez varietal, and they wanted to work with another white grape that was also indigenous to Piedmont, and that was also kind of in need of a little bit more love and care. So they had really loved what they had been seeing with the Timorasso grape varietal. There's a producer in this area, Colli Tortonese, called Walter Massa. And if you've ever had his wines, they're, I think, under the label Vignetti Massa, really small production. And he focuses on a lot of these super rare indigenous Piedmontese varietals. And Timorasso was one of the grapes that he really specialized in. So the Corrado family actually consulted with him when they wanted to start working with Timorasso. And he's been a really amazing advocate for working with the grape and has actually helped a lot of other Barolo producers who are now interested in Timorasso find some really great land to work with in the Colli Tortonese region. This name De Throna that you see here is actually the ancient Latin name for the town Tortona, which is where this area kind of resides in. So that's why you see De Throna on the label. And that's actually a classic term that Walter Massa, that kind of original pioneer bringing back Timorasso, would always use on his label too. So very exciting stuff. This is actually the first vintage that Timorasso from Vieti has been available outside of the winery. So it's the first year that it's come to the American market. So this is a brand new wine, super limited production. And we might be asking, why are they even interested in bringing back this grape varietal Timorasso? What makes it so interesting and exciting? And I'm going to tell you why I think, but you can maybe after you try it, tell me if you think so too. So Timorasso is one of the few white grape varietals that has a lot of phenolic properties. So most of the time with like a lot of white grapes, there's a lot of white wines that don't tend to age very well. And the reason being is because typically when you're making white wine, you're just taking the grape, pressing the juice, fermenting it, and then choosing your aging vessel. So you're not a lot of times going to have a lot of, if any, tannin in the white wine. Which is going to be also a very important component to aging wine. And it's something that you find in red wines because of the fact that you're using the grape skins. Vieti's Timorasso and the Timorasso grape in general is one of the few whites that have a lot of natural phenolic compounds. So it adds a lot of this beautiful texture, aromatics, and also structural elements to this white grape that not a lot of other white grapes actually have. So not only is it one of the rarer white grapes of Italy, but it's also one of the most long-lived and age-worthy. And for those of you who are Burgundy lovers here, This is definitely a grape that a lot of people might compare to white Burgundy, more along the lines of kind of a Chablis from Northern Burgundy, but also for the Loire Valley lovers here too. A lot of people also make comparisons to some like longer lived aged Loire Valley Chenin Blancs, because the Chenin Blanc also has more of those phenolic compounds as well. So it's just a very kind of exciting grape that just has a lot of possibility. And this is actually a wine that actually has aging potential of possibly 10 years or more, which is, it's drinking really well now, but that's kind of very interesting and something a little bit more unique to find. So without further ado, I'm just going to kind of take you through tasting the wine, and then we can open it up for questions. Okay. Awesome. So something that I was really struck by when I initially opened this wine is like you get these really beautiful citrus tones, but you also get these kind of like piney and acacia elements to the wine too. It's not overall a varietal that I would say is like super aromatic on the nose or even on the palate. And because of the fact that it's not hyper perfumed, it actually makes it a much better candidate for pairing with food. Because sometimes when you have a wine that has too many aromatic elements, especially for white, it can kind of throw you off with some pairings, because sometimes the overpowering aromatics can really kind of not mix well with certain food pairings. So sometimes I always recommend a white wine that has a little less kind of aromatic power to pair with a wider variety of dishes, just because it's a little bit more versatile. Wow. So what I also makes me really happy about this wine is I love white wines that just have a lot of energy and vibrant acidity. This has some really beautiful inherent freshness to it. But at the same time, what I love about it so much is it's fresh without being sour or tart. And the energy here is just very uplifting. The minerality is super present. And it's really interesting. They actually aged this wine in a combination of stainless steel, ceramic eggs, which is kind of an equivalent to like concrete, and then a little like used oak, or kind of more neutral barrel. So it just provides a couple different aging like kind of elements that will create some really nice harmonious texture in the wine and just create like a really great sense of balance. So you get like a little bit of that viscosity, but at the same time, it still feels fresh and uplifted and just really well integrated. And for those of you who have gotten to try the wine so far, you might notice that it has almost like a little bit of that like fine tannin, which is kind of that drying sensation. So this is definitely, while you could totally drink this on its own, it is definitely a white wine that kind of begs for food. So that is why I actually put a pairing here, which is something typically you can find in Piedmont, which is just a carne cruda, which is basically kind of in the lines of like a steak tartare. But definitely something that's just a little bit more raw, drizzled with beautiful extra virgin olive oil, I think would be perfect for a wine like this, though it's just a very versatile wine. So you could pair it with chicken, and I think it would also just be wonderful with a variety of seafood dishes as well. So something really fun and interesting and unique. How's everybody doing? What do we think about, for anybody that's gotten to taste this, has anybody had any experiences that they'd like to share?
Last weekend and we loved it.
Oh, great.
So we'd like more. Is it difficult to get, Chelsea?
It is difficult to get. So this is something that we got, I think around, we probably brought into Gordon's maybe around 50 cases or so. And we're almost, I think we're about out, but they will be getting in a new vintage in January, I've been told. So we should be able to gain access to it again in the winter time for the new vintage, which is exciting. But it is, once again, such a small production wine, and it is something that for a long period of time was winery only. So with some of the wines that we carry for CruBox, some of them will be available afterwards. Others, we just don't know. And that's kind of sometimes one of the challenges of some of these smaller production items, but it's also just super fun to be able to share it with everybody. So any questions about the Vietti Timorasso? Anything that I could cover or go into in a little more detail for you?
So I've had this wine, well, I've had a Timorasso once before.
Yeah.
Over the summer when I was basically doing a kind of can I find an obscure grape varietal from Italy that I'd never tasted before?
Yes.
And I loved it. It was hard to find.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I love this. The thing which was noticeable in its on the other, which was older than this, but which I'm getting a hint of here, is the slightly kind of hydrocarbony kind of thing, almost like some Rieslings.
Yeah, definitely. So when I said that the Timorasso is a little more kind of comparable to maybe like Burgundy, white Burgundy, or Chenin Blanc, I also definitely think Riesling is another varietal that you can make a comparison with. Definitely, especially with that like acidity, the backbone, the texture. Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that one. And that's just like part of like, those are some of, once again, also like, especially in the Chenin Blanc and Riesling world, two of the more age-worthy white varietals that exist. So it kind of makes sense that this has a little bit more similar characteristics, right? Because it's also a grape varietal that they're saying can go for just such a long period of time. And it would be interesting too, like I haven't gotten to experiment with really old Timorasso. So hopefully now that more is available in the market, like it'd be really interesting to kind of taste some like vintages that are 10 plus years old and understand what it tastes like as it ages. Because I haven't had, I don't think, a Timorasso that's more than 5 years old. So it'll be exciting to explore that. And I will definitely let you all know once I get there, for sure. Thanks, Bill. Any other questions?
Chelsea, I like the fact that this is can age over 10 years. I've had too many bottles of white wine that I've had to apologize to my guests about.
No,
So
for sure.
It's great. I can't wait to try it.
Yeah, it's very cool. And the thing is too, like this wine's obviously approachable right now. That's what like makes a lot of these wines really interesting, right? Is the fact that you can definitely approach it now, definitely drink it now. But if you did want to hold on to it for a couple of years, especially if you were to get another bottle and kind of see how it tastes now, see how it tastes in a few years from now, it's just kind of an interesting thing to do. So for those that are interested in kind of tasting a wine as it evolves and ages, I always sometimes recommend whether you get a case of it or whether you get a couple bottles and kind of taste it now, taste it in a year, taste it in 3 years. You know, it's just always kind of interesting to see like how each wine like evolves over time, as you know, some wines don't always stand the test of time. There are very few wines, I guess, in our world that, you know, are meant for longer term aging. So it's always exciting when we find one, and it's just interesting to kind of explore how they kind of adjust over time.
Yeah, this is a little bit more challenging than Arnez. Arnez is very user-friendly.
Totally. So the Arnez, so anybody that hasn't had it before, I recommend Vietti makes this beautiful Roero Arnez, which is the other white varietal actually that they've been working with for a long time that they originally brought back. And the Arnez is much more apple focused. Like apple is definitely like kind of very fresh, clean apple. Is kind of one of the primary tasting elements. And it's just a very clean, beautiful, simple, bright, fresh wine. I'd say, well, Arnez can have definitely much more complexity. The Vietti Arnez, I wouldn't say is the most complex wine, but it's so well made. It's such a great everyday wine or weekly wine. And the Timorasso, I think, adds just a little bit more complexity and structure. And it's just kind of an interesting comparison. But I would definitely say, if you're looking to kind of explore whites from Piedmont a little bit more, Arnez, Timorasso, and then of course the region of Gavi, which produces the grape varietal Cortese, they're all very interesting to explore. And Piedmont just has, in my opinion, some of my favorite wines. So we have 2 from there tonight. We had 1 last month, so I'm so sorry, but I might be continuing to put in wines from Piedmont. So I hope everybody else is on board, because they're just so interesting and fun. There's so much to explore.
So Chelsea, I find you compared this to white Burgundy.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that on the influence of the oak and a little bit of oxidation that I get. However, I think it's a lot more muted than a Chardonnay. I think the acidity and the mouthfeel are a lot more muted. I think this one would stand on its own apart from a Chardonnay, even though the Chablis is a good comparison, but I think it only goes as far as the oak influence, I think, of a Grand Cru Chablis. But I think that the mutedness of it makes it much, for me, for my palate, much more enjoyable to go with than a big oaky Chardonnay.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with what you're saying, Wayne. I'd say like the thing about white Burgundy, right, is it is kind of a more general thing to say in the sense that there's so many different styles, within white Burgundy in terms of like, the oak manipulation, in terms of the levels of acidity, depending on if you're more north or more south. So I guess just making kind of the comparison in the sense that similar to Chardonnay, Timorasso is a little bit more of a like not super perfumey varietal. It's something that's a little bit more on the neutral side of things. And it's also a grape that can take on oak in like a really beautiful and refined way. Not every single grape can do that. And it has that fresh acidity. But at the same time, I totally see what you're saying. I think that there are definitely some differences, especially depending on where you go in Burgundy. So just a little bit of a comparison here or there, but definitely not the same for sure. Any other questions, or would you like to move on to the next wine? We'll do it. Let's go for it. Awesome. So, okay, we're getting a little crazy for number 2 here. I thought it would just be fun to do something a little more playful and just have fun with it. So I'm taking you now to Abruzzo. So if we go on your map, you're going to see that Abruzzo is going to be on the eastern side, on the Adriatic coast of Italy here. It's B. And the region of Abruzzo too is going to be just to the east of Lazio, which is the region where Rome lies on the map. So just to the east. This is a producer named Tiberio. The vintage is 2019. And the style of wine, or the DOC, Denominazione Origine Controllata, is Cerasuelo d'Abruzzo. So this is an interesting area, and let's just talk about it for a second, because the region of Abruzzo is most well known for 2 grape varietals. So it's known for the white grape of Trebbiano, which is actually one of the more widely planted grape varietals of Italy. And then it is known for the red grape varietal of Montepulciano. So typically you'd see it labeled as Trebbiano d'Abruzzo or Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, which is different than there's a style of wine in Tuscany called Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, which comes from the town of Montepulciano, but has the grape of Sangiovese. Whereas in Abruzzo, they're working with the grape varietal of Montepulciano. So once again, a little wild and crazy Italians. But this is a really cool winery, and it's family owned, actually originally owned by originally owned by Riccardo Tiberio, and then taken over by Cristiana and her brother Antonio a few years back. And I actually had the wonderful experience during kind of when COVID first started to do like a video call with Cristiana while she was in the vineyards in Abruzzo, which was just really magical to see during a time that was a little dark for everybody. Getting to see her kind of rolling around the vineyards in Abruzzo at her beautiful property was a really amazing thing. And she actually has, I'm a big dog lover. She has 2 or 1, I'm not quite sure if she still has 2 dogs, which are Great Pyrenees dogs. If you've ever seen them, they're big and fluffy and just white and really adorable. And they're just kind of running through the vineyards with her. And she's just a really great female winemaker who's really taking on these indigenous grape varietals of Trebbiano and Montepulciano and making just wines, I think, that just have great quality and integrity to them, but they're not necessarily meant to be super complex or, super age-worthy, but very high quality and really representative of kind of the true kind of quality and varietals that exist in Abruzzo. So while she makes a style called Trebbiano d'Abruzzo, the white, and then the red Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, this is a style which is a kind of newer DOC called Cerasuelo d'Abruzzo. So Cerasuelo translates in Italian to cherry. And basically what it is it's a rosé made from Montepulciano. And it is technically, to be called the Cerasuelo d'Abruzzo DOC, you have to have a minimum 85% Montepulciano grape to make the wine. You can choose to blend it with 15% other kind of traditional grape varietals, but typically it will be, a lot of producers will use 100% Montepulciano. How this kind of differs from a traditional rosé is they will take the grapes, press them, and then let the skins kind of soak or macerate. For a lighter style like Rosé Montepulciano, they might just do that for a couple of hours. For the Cerasuelo, they typically sometimes will go even up to a day to give it just a little bit more color, where it almost kind of stands out as like an in-between of a rosé and a light red wine, because that's kind of exactly what they're going for here. But also too, with the limited amount of skin contact that you get with the juice here, you have a limited amount of tannin. So it's meant to be a very fresh, like clean, easy tasting wine, but has like a little bit more body to it, I'd say, than the average rosé. What I find really interesting about the Cerasuelo d'Abruzzo is a lot of people sometimes get really thrown off when you see a deeply hued rosé wine, something that's not just light and kind of what you traditionally find out of Provence in southern France. Sometimes a lot of us equate some of these darker hued rosés to white Zinfandel or some of the lower quality, more sugary California rosés of years past. And I think that sometimes it's easy to kind of think if the color's darker that you're going to find more residual sugar in the wine, because that's just some of the things that we've seen in the past. But there is no, when tasting this wine, it's incredibly fresh, incredibly lively, and offers really beautiful fruit. But at the same time, this is a bone dry wine. So it just kind of goes to show that definitely keep an open mind with some of these rosés, because there's so many different styles being produced all over the world. And sometimes the hue isn't necessarily going to dictate like what the taste is like or what the tasting experience is like. Like, for example, I've had so many different rosés in the past that are darker in color, and they actually taste really light bodied on the palate, and they can be bone dry. So I always like to say, keep an open mind there, because the looks can definitely be deceiving for sure. What I noticed about this wine right away when I opened it is, first of all, this color is just beautiful. I was actually lining up all of the wines together, and the colors are gorgeous. And I don't know if it's just me being in the holiday spirit, but I love looking at just like all the different colors that wines can produce. And definitely since Cerasuelo once again translates to cherry, they're always going for this kind of more cherry, deeply hued rosé color. So that's going to be more traditional. But what I love about this is you definitely get some of those red fruits, but definitely more of that kind of tart characteristic that comes through, kind of tart to fresh, which is indicating a little bit of a kind of cooler influence, because this is going to be about 20 miles inland from the fishing town of Pescara on the coast of Abruzzo. And what I also love about this is not only does it have some of these kind of like minerally red fruit characteristics, but you also get like this beautiful orange peel, which also once again gets me excited about the holidays, because it just has that beautiful kind of like red fruit and like almost like these beautiful baking spices that come through in orange peel. And it's just super fresh and clean and fun. It once again has great acidity here. So this is something that could cut through a rich dish really nicely. I actually had it here paired with this Cioppino seafood stew with gremolata toast, because I was thinking about the feast of the Feast of the Italian Fishes, the Feast of the Seven Fishes, which is the traditional kind of Italian celebration for Christmas. And I just thought that this is once again another wonderful candidate for kind of some richer seafood dishes, whether it's some type of seafood stew or a richer kind of fish dish, whether it's tuna tartare, tuna steak. It's just, I think, really versatile and super fun. And you could totally have this with pasta, but like, I think just with seafood, it's just so exciting. Did anybody get to taste the Cerasuelo, and did anybody have any thoughts they'd like to share?
I'm actually drinking it tonight.
Cool.
And I agree with everything you're saying. It's an interesting wine. I think if you did it blind and blindfolded, you would think it's a red wine actually.
Yeah.
Even though it's got some of those rotations. So how I feel this, you could drink it as cold in the summertime.
Yeah.
With a little bit of chill on it, but also right now it's got some really nice savory elements to it too. So
yeah,
it's like a very versatile wine.
I think so too. I put mine in the fridge for about like a half an hour before I like took it out. I think you could really like play around with temperature here, just as you said, depending on like the time of year. I really kind of think this is one of those great candidates as like a winter rosé, right? Because it's almost basically like a light red. So you can really play around here with chilling it down, like on a summer day or a warmer day where it's like
Right, for
great
Christmas.
to have with a lighter bodied white wine. But like at this time of year, once again, I just popped it in the fridge for a half an hour. I've actually had it sitting out for a while too, and it just has a very slight chill on it, and it's just like perfect right now. So kind of you can play around and have a little fun. But it's definitely a style of wine that's just, it's fun and playful in the sense that it's not like a overly complex wine. This is not a candidate for aging. I think enjoying this over the next couple of years or now is ideal. But that being said, it's really well made and everything's just well integrated and it's fun. And I just think it's delicious. It almost has that little kick for any of you that have had Flintstone vitamins. Sorry if I'm making myself seem a little childlike here, but it just has like a little bit of that kind of Flintstone vitamin pop to it, which is fun and playful and it just makes me happy. But at the same time, having that great acidity that like can really cut through some richer dishes, whether you're having this with like a soft, richer cheese, or once again, pairing it with a little bit of a richer seafood dish. But it's once again, a very versatile food pairing wine. There's so many different things that I could just have fun with here. And I think for the holidays too, sometimes it's just nice to have something with a really festive pop of color. So I'm really enjoying it. I think it's super fun. Any questions about the Tiberio Cerasuolo? We ready to move to Sicily? Let's do it. Let's go wild. Okay. So for our first real red wine, I guess, tonight, I'm just going to go over the 2019 Occhipinti SP68, which is a basically, so this is going to be an IGT wine, which is that second level of designation. It stands for Indicazione Geografica Tipica. And the IGT here is Terre Siciliane, which is basically indicating that it can come from a larger swath of land within Sicily. So Sicily is going to be the island at the southwest of Italy. And it's an area that I had the extreme pleasure of visiting with my family a couple of years back, as my mom's side of the family has family roots in Marsala to the west. But actually this region where this wine is made is one of the few areas in Sicily that I didn't get to go to. And we're definitely looking forward to going, hopefully one time soon. So this is the southeastern corner of Sicily where this wine comes from. So if you look on your map, you can see where the sea is on the map. And this is a winemaker named Arianna Occhipinti. She is definitely a rock star in Sicilian winemaking and Italian winemaking. And she's kind of known as one of the natural winemaking pioneers of Italy and definitely of Europe.
Yes.
So definitely something that is just really special and fun. So this is a style of wine that's called, she calls it SP68. She does a Rosso and a Bianco, so a white and a red. SP68 is actually the road or the highway that kind of cuts through the vineyard in southeastern Sicily. And she makes a style of wine which can sometimes be referred to, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the DOCG in southeastern Sicily, called Cerasuolo di Vittoria. So we just talked about Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo. Cerasuolo di Vittoria is actually the only DOCG or highest level of designation within Sicily, which is in the southeastern corner. And it typically will make wines that are a blend of Nero d'Avola and Frappato. So Nero d'Avola is going to be one of the most traditionally widely planted grape varietals of Sicily. It typically makes a more heartier red wine that typically is a little bit more earth driven, a little bit more kind of dark fruit focused. So almost like a little bit more of like a Cabernet or Syrah drinkers style wine, definitely like bigger and bolder. And then Frappato is a blending varietal. You can see it on its own, but typically used in blends, also from southeastern Sicily. And that tends to be a little bit lighter, a little bit more herbaceous. If anybody's had Gamay before from Beaujolais, it's a little bit more Gamay-like in the sense that it's light, fresh, red fruit focused, and definitely, unlike Gamay, very herbaceous and sometimes a little bit earthy. So instead of this being the DOCG Cerasuolo di Vittoria, which would have typically a minimum Nero d'Avola and Frappato, this actually has about 70% Frappato, blended with Nero d'Avola. So it could not fall within that Chirasuelo de Vittoria DOCG because it has too much for Pato. And it actually also doesn't fall within that Chirasuelo de Vittoria because of the fact that it doesn't have enough aging. So typically Chirasuelo de Vittoria has a minimum aging requirement of 1 year. This wine's only aged for several months. And Arianna Occhipinti did this because she wanted to create a lighter, kind of fresher wine. And she wanted to use Frappato as the star of this wine, as opposed to Nero d'Avola. She's wild and crazy like that and likes to kind of differentiate herself. So this wine was basically downgraded down to a Terre Siciliane as opposed to the DOCG of Chirasuelo de Vittoria, but she did that on purpose. So Frappato will bring, once again, this beautiful kind of like herbaceous element to the wine. And Arianna Occhipinti is known as a natural winemaker. So when I'm breaking that down, basically what that means is she's going to do as little as she can to the vineyard. She's going to farm organically, and she takes that a step further by farming biodynamically, which is basically a more, as we talked about, I think maybe last time, a more holistic approach to farming. That's following a very specific set of guidelines within the biodynamic principles. And she'll also plant a bunch of other crops in the vineyards too, to kind of like overall just try to benefit that environment so that each element of the environment is taken care of to its highest level so that you can create really high quality vines. She also does not use any irrigation, which is interesting because it can get very dry there in southeastern Sicily. But once again, the stress for the vines can be very positive, and the vines will just dig that much far deeper down into the ground to get the water that they need. And she also uses like a gravity flow winery too. So she's really not only focused on like really high quality farming and very limited intervention winemaking, but she's focused on that not just in the vineyard, but in the wine cellar as well. She'll never use any new oak on any of her wines. She does not believe in that. She uses oak mainly as a vessel to kind of let the wine's natural characteristics shine through. So when she's used barrels that have been used several times, they're not going to impart like an oaky flavor or aroma to the wines. They're just going to kind of help cradle that wine or those grapes and kind of make them the best that they can possibly be. And she is a really dynamo lady. Her uncle actually started a winery also amongst two other friends in southeastern Sicily called COS, C-O-S. If anybody's ever had those wines, they're phenomenal. And his name's Giusto, I think, Occhipinti. And they also are a huge pioneer of this like natural approach to winemaking in southeastern Sicily. She's taken a lot of their lead when she started her own winery, and she's definitely become one of those really coveted winemakers. We were talking about importers earlier. She's imported by a really well-known importer who does a lot of works with a lot of natural kind of small producers named Louis Dresner. It's a little wacky. So if you're looking for wines kind of more similar to this and you enjoy this style of wine, I definitely look out for Louis Dresner's name on the back of the label, as he's great importer for a lot of these small producers. And when tasting this wine, you might notice that like there's a little bit of funk here on the nose. When I say that, this wine smells a little dirty. It smells maybe a little feral. It's a little wild sometimes on the nose, especially when you initially open it. But it does, for me, it blows off really nicely. And when I was just admiring the color of this wine, initially, I was just really taken by the fact that you just get these beautiful kind of burgundy and ruby red tones that come through, and another just very vibrantly hued wine. Typically, if this had more Nero d'Avola in the blend, it would be definitely very hard to see your fingers on the opposite side of the glass. It would be a lot more opaque. But the wine here is just very light, very easy to see through, and just beautiful. Her wines are all about freshness. The SP68 Bianco that she makes, which we do have in stock, is a blend of two indigenous white varietals called Zabibo and Albarello. I think it's the second grape. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But very kind of light floral. But her wines are all about just being very fresh, very minimal, minimalistic in terms of the winemaking and farming techniques. and just letting kind of the indigenous varietals of Sicily shine through in the best possible way. This wine is a little on the earthier side, but at the same time, it's still made with like really high quality standards. So the nice, like kind of more tart fruits do still come through. And another just really fun, exciting offering from Sicily. There's so much to explore there. Anybody that wants to get geeky with me on Sicilian wine, we can talk about it for a long time, because there is a lot that I saw on my trip there, and I just got so inspired, and there's just still so much that I want to explore there. And for those of you that are into natural wine, there's a lot to explore there as well. For my pairing, I put classic pasta alla norma. For those of you who have not had pasta alla norma, it's a traditional Sicilian pasta dish that uses eggplant as in the sauce, and it's just beautiful, and I think it would go perfectly with this wine. If anybody ever wants recipes from any of these pairings I suggest, just please drop me an email and I would be happy to send you one. I actually made this dish for my father's birthday, and it's just really beautiful. So definitely, I think eggplant.
Totally agree.
Yes. I think eggplant in the Trapato and Neurodabla would be really nice. This is actually also a style of wine, interestingly enough, that you could pair with seafood. I know that might seem a little cray, but definitely in Sicily, for some of the lighter to medium bodied red wines, especially with a little chill on them, they will traditionally have them with seafood. Definitely tuna there is big. And think about it, if it's a richer fish dish, you can definitely get away with that too. So there are sometimes some crazy things that you can do with wine pairings, but definitely the Frappato here is a lot more forgiving than the Neurodabla. It's less tannic. So I think it could definitely stand up to a richer fish dish as well. But the possibilities here are pretty also endless. There's a lot of fun things. So if you ever have kind of very specific pairing ideas, or if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I'm always happy to provide recipes because that's so much fun. Any questions about SP68?
Not a question, but a comment.
Great.
Opened it last weekend with pasta carbonara, which
Nice. How was that?
was delicious.
Oh, good. Oh my gosh, how fun. Did you make the carbonara?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's so yummy. I love carbonara. That sounds amazing, especially on a night like tonight too. But I'm sure it was a cold night when you had it, and I'm sure it was just so heartwarming and lovely. So that's amazing. So good. Anything else that people like to comment or questions about the SP68?
It's good.
We like it.
Cool. It's always good. Awesome. Would you like to move on to the next one or to the last wine? We'll do it. Okay, cool. So for our last wine, I'm taking you back to Piedmont. Surprise, surprise, right? But for our last wine, we'll be going to an area in Piedmont that's called Doliani. So our last wine is the 2017 San Ferriola, and it's called Vigna Dolci Doliani Superiore. It's a DOCG wine. So the DOCG wines, along with certain DOC wines, will have this ribbon at the top. So DOCG, once again, stands for Denominazione Origine Controllata Garantita. And what you'll find with these DOCG wines in Italy is they're representing usually very small census of place, vineyard sites or regions, and there's more stricter aging requirements, stricter yields per hectare that you can plant. There's a lot more kind of restrictions that you have to follow because at the end of the day, you're trying to represent a sense of place. So what's interesting about this wine is actually there would be no indication on the label here of what the grape is if you looked at it. Vigna Dolce is just the name of the wine. San Ferriola is the producer. Doliani is the region. And Superiore just indicates it's a kind of level up of Doliani that we can talk about in a little bit. But actually, Doliani is an area that is only known for Dolcetto production. So in Piedmont, you have three main red grape varietals that are planted there. You have Nebbiolo, which is kind of the rock star, which makes straight Nebbiolo wines from like the Langhe region and from the north as well, but also most well known for being used in the wines from Barolo and Barbaresco. you have the Barbera grape varietal, which is typically the workhorse of Piedmont, one of the most widely planted red grape varietals, and it can be made in a very simplistic kind of everyday style, but also can be made as a more serious wine as well. And if you have any questions about that or would like some examples later, I'd be happy to provide them too, because I've actually had some really interesting, thought-provoking, age-worthy Barbera, which a lot of producers are starting to take more seriously. The wine, Barbera, can be a little bit more intense than Nebbiolo, just in terms of the color, in terms of the like darker fruit, and in terms of the body, but definitely can be made in a kind of very easygoing, everyday style and more serious as well. And then you have Dolcetto, which is kind of the third everyday or the third grape varietal of Piedmont in terms of usage, but it's definitely also known typically as kind of an everyday grape that doesn't really get the love or attention that Nebbiolo gets for sure, and even Barbera. Dolcetto is most well known for being planted in the areas of which are called Dolcetto d'Asti or Dolcetto of Asti and Dolcetto d'Alba. And a lot of Barolo or Barbaresco producers will typically also make Barbera. They'll also make a Dolcetto or a Longue Nebbiolo. But this is actually, once again, an area that really just focuses on Dolcetto. And the reason I think Dolcetto doesn't always do as well in some of the other areas is because some of the other grapes, especially Nebbiolo, are more coveted in those areas. So Dolcetto misses out on some of the best vineyard sites because, to be honest, it's not a very profitable grape varietal in comparison to the Nebbiolo varietal. So producers are always going to take the best land and dedicate it to Nebbiolo because it's going to always be a more fruitful experience for them. So Doliani, which is going to be a little more to the south, is really a higher elevation area that just specializes in Dolcetto. And because it's higher elevation, it gives you a Dolcetto that's a little bit more intense and a little more powerful than the everyday Dolcetto. A lot of times the Dolcetto d'Albas or Dolcetto d'Astis can be, once again, the most lovely, beautiful, just easygoing wine. It's typically a varietal that doesn't have as much tannin, definitely as the Nebbiolo grape and even with the Barbera grape, but can be light, fresh, almost a little bit, this sounds kind of silly to say, but grapey in terms of its like characteristics, just fun and fresh. And typically aged just very kind of playfully, whether it's just stainless steel or just something kind of like light, fresh, and everyday. I've actually been told by the people of Piedmont, or one of the producers that I visited, actually the producer from our last box, GD Byra, that they would actually traditionally use Dolcetto as a pairing with a lot of vegetarian dishes because meat wasn't something that everybody could afford all the time, especially back in the day. So they'd actually use Dolcetto as a classic pairing for a lot of bean dishes, which would be the traditional kind of alternative protein that they use to meat. But this is a producer from a great importer named Rosenthal, which specializes in, once again, a lot of small production family owned, especially Italian and French properties. And the producer's name is Sanferiola. This is our third female winemaker of the day. We're just really hitting it out of the park here with these wonderful women in wine in Italy. And it's a woman named Nicoletta Bocca, who started the winery in the early 1990s. And she's one of the top producers in Doliani making Dolcetto. She's making Dolcetto in a way that's more similar to Arianna Occhipinti, very limited intervention, kind of a little more of a hands-off approach. She's also using organic and I'm pretty sure also biodynamic farming. And this is coming from a high elevation single vineyard site, about 2,000 plus feet above sea level. And it's a style of wine that's called Doliani, but it's called Doliani Superiore. So basically you can have two different styles of wine in Doliani. You can have the Doliani wines, which are basically have to be, I think, a minimum 12% alcohol by volume. And there are no real strict aging requirements, but it has to be Dolcetto. And then this step up is called Doliani Superiore, which just has an extra year of aging mandated before release. And the minimum alcohol too here is 13%. So it's just a little bit more of a serious style wine than the straight Doliani wines. And you'll sometimes see the word Superiore too with a lot of DOCG wines, which will typically indicate a little higher alcohol that's minimum, or sometimes minimum aging requirements are a little bit higher too. So just something interesting to explore. When tasting this wine, I just first of all noticed it's so much more darkly hued than some of the other traditional dolcettos from Alba or Asti, which is interesting. So if you were able to, at some point, I might recommend, if you're interested in exploring dolcetto a little further, that you maybe get dolcetto d'Asti versus a dolcetto d'Alba versus a dolcetto from Doliani, and kind of see what you might get in terms of the differences between them. Because it's just, for me, like just looking at the hue of this wine, it's a lot more deeper than what I would traditionally find out of dolcetto. Just interesting. Wow. And it's just interesting too, because you just get a lot more length and complexity in this wine than I would typically find, once again, in this grape varietal. Definitely more kind of like blue, purple fruit focused here. More of that kind of licorice, like coffee grinds, almost like a little bit of that really dark kind of dark chocolate, but like that almost more granular dark chocolate. But really beautiful length and freshness here. This is honestly, for me, like a really exciting version of dolcetto that once again has some great aging potential, which is once again not something that you typically ever say for the dolcetto varietal. It's normally a grape that you would just most enjoy fresh. This is from the 2017 vintage, so already has about 3 years on it. But I would say that this could easily go for like another 5 years or so, and I'd be interested to see you know, it even go a little bit longer. It's just something that I wouldn't, once again, typically find with the varietal. So I'd be really interested to know what people think of it, if they tasted it, or if they have any questions about dolcetto or Doliani. Anyone?
Chelsea, how would you compare dolcetto to a Barolo?
Well, it's very different just because Barolo is going to be using the Nebbiolo varietal. It has more aging like requirement. And this is a grape also too. The Doliani dolcetto that we have from San Fariolo has no oak, aged in stainless steel, so there's no oak barrel. Whereas like Barolo will have a minimum aging requirement in oak. Nebbiolo is going to be a lot more different in terms of the characteristics. It's naturally higher in acidity, higher in tannin. The aromatics of Nebbiolo are definitely more in that kind of more savory quality, more kind of rose petal tar, more kind of cherry, but like in that tart kind of realm. It's just the aromatic experience is a little bit more similar to Pinot Noir, whereas this aromatic experience for me is just, it's kind of in a little bit of a league of its own, just more dark fruit focused, once again, more of that kind of licorice and coffee. And once again, this is not a grape that you typically really ever see aged, whereas Barolo is meant to age for a minimum of 10 years and keep on going. So this is just, I'd say, a little bit of an outlier. Whereas
And
like,
so what about Barbera though? Barbera, you don't, well, you can age Barbera, but Barbera, as you said, is more of an everyday wine. Is that more comparable to a dolcetto?
well, definitely Barbera is typically more fuller than like, this is a more fuller bodied dolcetto than the average dolcetto. It's more in line, I'd say, with the body of a typical Barbera, which is more in that kind of medium bodied spectrum. But that being said, Barbera does offer a little bit more tannin here, and the fruits are more red fruit focused. They still taste different, but I would, if I were blind tasting this, I wouldn't necessarily know that it was dolcetto. It's just, for me, it tastes so different than the average dolcetto that we see out of the market from Asti or Alba. So it's just interesting and fun.
Chelsea, you seem to be enamored by biodynamic and organic growers. Does their wine taste any better than wines grown with traditional methods?
Well, I'd say like I'm enamored more with like smaller producers, and I think the reason is because of their love for the craft, and I think that that's so important. And a lot of them do focus on organic or biodynamic farming principles, which I think is just another component of high quality winemaking. I think for those of us that are like focused on sustainability, who are focused on just, you know, people who have a love for their craft. For those people who really work to make sure that their vineyards are farmed with like organic or biodynamic principles, I think that really shows just a dedication to winemaking and to farming that is just one that's, I'd say, anchored in a lot of love and respect. And that's just something that for me is really important. And I do find that the wines are really high quality overall, typically, and that you overall just get great balance. And you know, some of these larger, more commercial wineries will farm with a lot of pesticides. They'll farm with a lot of chemicals in the vineyards. And I just don't think that that's, if we can not have to drink that, I think that's great for us all, for sure. It's interesting when people are thinking about alcohol, a lot of times you don't think about always, like, you always think about alcohol as maybe not being good for you naturally. So people don't always think about, you know, organic when it comes to wine or when it comes to what they're drinking, especially if it's alcoholic. But I think everything, every little bit always counts. And I just love to once again support people who just really go at it from 100% in terms of like every level of dedication from, you know, whether it's farming or in the winery. And I think that that's a really important component.
Chelsea, I think also that a producer who farms organically or biodynamically, they care enough to do something that's a lot harder than using pesticides. And that translates into the winery also, where they're not adding all these additives, whether it's liquid oak or chemicals to make it taste the way they want. And I think I agree with you. I'm much more of a fan of smaller producers who don't mass produce, and by mass produce I mean to the point where you've got to use, you know, liquid oak, and you just can't afford that many barrels. If you're making 4 million cases of wine a year, you can't afford that many barrels. So I think it just goes hand in hand with the winery and the property. You know, if you're going to spend the time biodynamically farming, you're going to spend the time minimal intervention in the winery, and I think that's a good thing.
I think so too. And I think too, at the end of the day, like what we're trying to do here is showcase some of these smaller producers that we're just excited about, a lot of which are family run or just smaller operations, right? And like, I think that they have a ton of patience, whether it's like in the vineyard or in the cellar. And I just think it's like such a beautiful craft to like produce these wines that are just like really representative of the places from which these people a lot of times grow up or come from. And they're bringing that to you in a bottle. And I just think that's so exciting. And there's just, once again, with Italy, there's so much to explore, and it's so wild and crazy. So it's a really fun opportunity for us to all learn a little bit more about these kind of small areas, to hopefully get to travel there again one day, and, you know, just get to know some of these producers a little bit more and their heritage that they kind of are bringing to us in the bottle. So I think it's very
some of the coolest experiences I've had are literally sitting in a winemaker's living room or dining room, eating what his family prepared for me to eat and tasting his wines and talking to him, not in a fancy tasting room, but literally in their dining room on a wooden bench. You know, it is so cool, such an experience to do. I can't wait to get back at it.
I know, me too. But yeah, there's such a level of like hospitality with a lot of these winemakers. They're so sweet. Like, you'll go and visit them and you'll think you're getting a tour with like, you know, someone that they've hired to kind of give vineyard tours, like you'd find at a lot of different, especially American properties. And like you get like a personal tour with the winemaker themselves. And it's just like, it's such a magical experience. And like, just the level of hospitality is just really unmatched. It's a very special experience, and getting to meet a lot of the producers from which we've tasted tonight. I mean, I can just say that some of these people are just some of the most lovely, like just unassuming people, and they're farmers at the end of the day, and just supporting what it is that they're doing, and exploring what it is that they're doing. It's just, we're so lucky that we get to do it. So I guess with that being said, what I would just say is please keep on exploring Italian wine. It's so much fun. And if you ever want some recommendations of some producers to get into, whether you're looking from a specific region, such as Sicily, or you're looking, are you looking at a specific grape varietal that you want to kind of explore a little more, like some Timorasso producers to get into, I'd be happy to help you. So just always feel free to drop me an email. I'd be super happy to kind of guide you through that. But it's just been so much fun being with you all tonight. And it's just a crazy time that we're in right now, but this is definitely just so much fun to get to connect with everybody over these wines. And I hope that you get to continue to enjoy them. And I can't wait to, as always, hear your thoughts and feedback on the wines and just thoughts and feedback in general. It's always really appreciated. And it's just always so much fun to be with you all. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you,
Thank
Chelsea.
you.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Awesome.
Good job.
Much
That was
fun.
great.
I'm wishing everybody happy holidays and just hoping everybody's staying safe and healthy and drinking great wine, of course. And if there's ever anything that you need, just please feel free to drop me a line and I'll be in
Josie,
touch.
this was so fun, and I know Bryn would love this.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm happy to include her anytime.
It's really, really, it was a great night. Thank you.
Well, I am so excited to be here with you all and just going to be updating you on January's box shortly and just wishing everybody a happy holiday season and hope you have a great rest of the night. Enjoy the snow.
See you soon.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.